Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered about the hidden ethical dilemmas? The ones professionals in high-stakes fields like auditing face. Well, every single day we've got some really incredible insights you send in, specifically from the world of advanced audit and assurance, stuff around ethical standards, and importantly, how they actually play out in the real world. Our mission today really is to give you a shortcut, not just to understanding what ethical rules exist, but how they're rigorously applied when the stakes are highest, turning those abstract principles into concrete actions.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here, I think, is moving beyond just the theoretical knowledge, right, into the practical application of these ethical codes, which it raises a really important question kind of right from the start. When does advising a client cross that critical line into actually, managing their business? And crucially, why does that matter so much for audit integrity?
Right. To really get the advanced application, we need to set the stage a bit. Ethical standards, they're a huge part of the advanced audit and assurance, or AAA syllabus.
Yeah.
And they definitely build upon that foundational knowledge maybe you got from audit and assurance, AA. At their core, you've got the ACCA Code of Ethics and Conduct. It mirrors the IESBA's International Code of Ethics for professional accountants. We usually just call it the code. And this code, it outlines 5 fundamental principles: integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. Pretty straightforward, you might think.
Exactly. They sound clear, don't they? But the real test, the challenge, comes when these principles are under threat. And they're constantly under threat. Think about things like self-review, self-interest, advocacy, familiarity, even intimidation.
Yeah, those are the classic ones.
Right. And for those of you sitting UK and Ireland exams, there's an additional threat you need to know, the management threat. And this one directly impacts those really big principles: integrity, objectivity, and critically, independence.
Okay, so if the foundational stuff gives us the what, then AAA, the advanced level, it really challenges us with the how. It's not about just, rattling off definitions anymore. It's demonstrating you can apply that knowledge. In complex situations, you've got to go deeper.
That's absolutely right. When you're tackling ethics questions at the AAA level, there's a vital sort of structured approach you need. First step, identify the ethical threat. Seems obvious, but you need to pinpoint it.
Yeah.
Second, evaluate it. Understand how it's actually arising in this specific case, and what's the implication? What could go wrong? Third, apply your knowledge to that specific scenario. What safeguards could work? Or what action needs to be taken?
Okay.
And crucially, this is the big one. If you can't find appropriate safeguards, or maybe the safeguards you can find just don't reduce the threat enough down to an acceptable level, then the professional accountant, they absolutely must consider whether to even accept the engagement, or if they're already doing it, whether to continue. Sometimes walking away is the only ethical option.
That's fascinating how critical that application step is. It's not enough to just say, self-review threat. You need to show why it's a threat here. You get credit for really referencing the scenario, the specifics, not just dropping general knowledge points.
Precisely. A common mistake is just stating a general principle without, really tying it into the unique facts of the case. The depth comes from showing how a threat pops up in this context and then figuring out safeguards that are actually tailored to that situation.
Okay. Let's make this real. Let's bring it to life with an example from the materials you shared. Picture this. Mumbai Co. It's a listed company. Your firm just finished auditing their financial statements maybe a few weeks ago. All signed off. Now, their audit committee comes back to your firm. They're asking you to perform a review of the company's internal control system. Why? Well, they've got concerns. Controls seem to be deteriorating, and maybe there's an increased risk of fraud.
Okay. Right away, that scenario, it flags up a couple of things. Definitely a self-review threat. And potentially, it could lead to the firm assuming what we call a management responsibility.
Okay, let's unpack those. The self-review threat. How exactly does providing a review of internal controls create that specific risk for the auditor? Because you're reviewing controls, not the financials themselves at this point.
It's a good point, but think ahead. By reviewing the company's internal control systems now, your firm would later, during the next financial statement audit, essentially be reviewing its own work, its own recommendations or findings about those controls. And the danger there is the firm might be, maybe subconsciously, reluctant to highlight errors or weaknesses in the controls during the main audit, especially if doing so would expose flaws in the review work they just did. Or they might not be as thorough in their substantive testing, relying too much on controls they previously reviewed favorably. That's the self-review trap.
Okay, that makes sense. You're kind of invested in your previous work. And what about the management responsibility threat? Where does that come in?
Well, fundamentally, the design, implementation, and maintenance of systems and internal controls, that's management's job. Full stop. It's their responsibility. If the auditor steps in and starts doing that work, even if it's framed as a review that leads to detailed recommendations on how to fix things, they risk crossing the line into effectively assuming management responsibility. And that just demolishes independence.
Demolishes it how? Is it just frowned upon or?
No, it's much stronger than that. For an audit client, the ethical code is crystal clear. The threat to independence from taking on management responsibilities is so significant that no safeguards can reduce it to an acceptable level. None. Zero.
Wow. Okay, so it's not even a case of trying to manage the threat.
Exactly. It's a non-starter. You simply cannot do it if it constitutes taking on management responsibility for an audit client. It's a fundamental conflict.
So putting this all together for Mumbai Co., what does it actually mean for the firm? Can they, say, use separate teams? That's often suggested as a safeguard for self-review threats, right? A different team does the review, another does the audit.
That's where the real AAA level analysis comes in. Normally, yes, separate teams might be a potential safeguard in some self-review situations, but here's the crucial detail we mentioned earlier. Mumbai Co. is a listed company.
Ah, okay. And that changes things.
Completely. For listed companies, the ethical rules are even stricter in many areas. Specifically, the audit firm is prohibited from providing internal audit services if they relate to a significant part of the internal controls over financial reporting. This review they've been asked to do sounds very much like it falls into that category, especially given the concerns about deteriorating controls and fraud risk.
So even with separate teams?
Even with separate teams, the prohibition for listed clients overrides that potential safeguard in this context. Therefore, the firm must decline this additional work. There's no way to safeguard the threats adequately given the listed status and the nature of the service.
That single detail listed company completely flips the answer, doesn't it? It really underscores needing that depth of understanding, not just surface level rules.
Absolutely. It shows you have to read the scenario so carefully and consider all the facts. Is it listed? Is it a public interest entity? What exactly is the service being requested? These details matter hugely. It highlights that critical thinking, really digging into the specifics, is far more important than just memorizing a list of threats and safeguards.
Wow.
Knowledge is really most valuable when it's not just known, but understood and crucially applied. What strikes me here is how seemingly small details like that listed status can just dramatically alter the whole ethical landscape and what the professional must do. It really underscores that critical thinking is just essential, especially today with so much information flying around, and particularly when independence, that cornerstone of auditing, is on the line.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, maybe next time you encounter a professional service, could be an audit, could be legal advice, even medical advice. You might have a slightly deeper appreciation for the intricate ethical tightropes these professionals walk every day. You might just find yourself asking, are they just telling me the rules? Or are they truly applying them to my specific situation to make sure integrity and independence are really there? Something to think about.